with a lot, especially here in New York, is that climate change looks different depending on where you live and what your economic status is, and lots of other factors. So speaking broadly about climate change isn't always the most personal connection that one can make to a project. So, for example, in upstate New York, climate change looks like shorter growing seasons or other agricultural impacts. It looks like flooding in Westchester County. In downstate New York, it looks like really poor air quality. So instead of making people guess what we mean by climate change, we try to be really specific about what we're talking about. So when we talk about climate change as it relates to New York City, we're always very sure to talk about air quality and how this project and others will make it easier to breathe and reduce the asthma rates that we're seeing here. When we talk about climate change in Westchester, we talk about the fact that this community has seen huge amounts of flooding and that by reducing emissions, we can help maybe alleviate some of those impacts. When we talk about climate change in upstate New York, we talk about the fact that your growing season used to be this many months and now it's 2 months shorter. We should bring it back. That's not good for your bottom line. So we always try to translate these things into what makes sense to who we're talking to. So climate change is, it's not a dirty word, but it isn't always the clearest word. So we try to make sure that we're just being really clear about what we're talking about. And actually what you just said about not using acronyms and sort of demystifying this stuff, it's a good reminder for me too, because even though I'm not a developer or an engineer, I'm still in it every single day, and it's important for me to be reminded to, I talked about Article 7 5 minutes ago, as if that's something that people in this room know or care about. It's always important for me to remember to not use jargon, even if I don't think I'm being jargony. It's really, really important to make sure that our content is as accessible to as many people as possible, and that we're not using any barriers to getting people interested or engaged. So, and again, these rooms are really important reminders of that. And I think also, I'll say this too, there are a lot of different opinions across the 175,000 emissions I'm talking about climate change, about whether or not it's real or whether or not we should do anything about it. I know where I stand on it, but it honestly doesn't always matter what I think. I'm here to make sure that the communities I'm talking to feel connected to what's going to be built in their neighborhood. So one thing I think about a lot is not approaching people with skepticism or not belittling people for having different opinions than me. It's my job to just make sure that what I'm doing and what this project is doing is making sense to that person. And even if they don't believe in climate change and they don't believe that it's the existential issue facing our generation, they might believe that they need a stronger electric grid. They might believe that they want their energy bills to be stabilized. And they might believe that they want their growing seasons to be back to normal. And if we can agree on those things, then then that's enough.
Yeah, it's meeting people where they are. It's talking in their language that they understand, not literal language, but what they know and are interested in. I think that's a really important tactic when creating social media content as well. It's connecting what you're doing to something that people are already interested in. And climate touches everything. So if people are interested in sports, they're interested in food, they're interested in travel, whatever it is, climate is there. And you can hook them in with that other topic and explain the relation to climate. And I think the absolute master at this is a scientist, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, who has a book called Saving Us, who really inspired my environmental communication. And she does talks around the world, at least around the country, and she goes to areas where climate change is not understood that well or talked about, and she'll do an entire hour-long conversation completely about climate change, but without saying climate change. People that may not understand what climate change is, but they understand what drought and crop failure is, and that's very real to them. It's affecting the lives of these farmers in rural areas, and it's putting yourself in the shoes of the person that's listening to you and communicating it.
Humility.
Exactly.
Humility is a word that I try to keep in myself when I'm doing these things. It's not about me.
Right.
I'm not the one who has to host this thing in my backyard. It's making sure that whatever it is that gets this person up in the morning is what this project is trying to solve.
Totally. It's super important. Hard to remember sometimes when you're the one in the weeds making the decisions, but yeah, it's a very good reminder. I would like to, we got one or two more questions, and we'll open it up to Q&A. Can you connect the dots for me a little bit between when you're communicating about your project, why it's important, how it's beneficial, and then getting a regular person to take the next step into taking an action, into getting involved, giving you a comment? This is something that I struggle with, so excited to learn from you. Because people that really resonate with what I'm saying, it's still hard to get them off of social media. The platforms don't like it, they want people to stay so they don't make linking things out easy. And I'm curious if you've noticed certain things that work well into actually getting someone to take the next step.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about social media, and it is such an important place to build community and share information. But I think it's also important to remember that not everybody is on social media. There are lots of generations and communities that don't consider that the primary place to get their news. So we have to make sure that we're putting information in other news outlets and other platforms as well, right? When we were up in Sullivan County in upstate New York a little while ago, and I asked somebody, where they get their news from, and they mentioned this local tiny community newspaper that has like a classified section. I check it every single day to see what's going on, and it's not a newspaper that would have been on my radar as one that we should be putting information in, but now I know, and now we put information there, and I make sure to put like an update on Clean Path every single quarter so that that person and people in that same community are getting information about this project where they get their news. I'm less interested in making people come to where we are and more interested in going to where these networks currently already exist. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to minimize social media at all. It's so important. I mean, I think everyone in this room probably is an active social media person, but there are a lot of people that don't consider it their primary source, or it's one of many. So it's just being really open-minded about where you are publicizing your information. And to your point, if social media it makes it difficult to link out, for example, putting a link in a local bulletin. I know that you can't click it, but you'd be surprised. People type this stuff into the URLs and then you go, and then they end up where they're supposed to go. So there are lots of different places so you can get people engaged and connected, and it's our job as developers to try and find them all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to just lead things off with your biggest takeaways on how your learnings and how they can apply to future renewable energy projects. And in conjunction with that, what do you imagine the future to be like? The future of New York City, maybe in a more solar punk reality, where we have more clean energy around us and just a better quality of life. To you, when you close your eyes and think about the future of New York, of the world, what does that look like, and how can we continue to get there?
Oh my gosh, such a great and big question. What a great way to end Climate Week too.
I can go first if you need to think.
No, I'm just thinking so many of my friends, for example, who are having children now for the first time, they are leaving New York City because they are worried about raising children in a place that has some of the worst air quality on the Eastern Seaboard. And I would like that not to be the case. I would like parents to feel like the air that they can raise their children in is safe, breathable, and that asthma isn't a 100% guarantee if you live in a certain area of New York City. So that's a big dream of mine is clean air. It just seems like such a basic thing to expect for yourself, but it isn't. It's not a guarantee right now. So there's that. And then learnings along the way. And again, I think humility is a big one. It can be really easy when you're developing a big project like this that is good and that is going to solve big issues to be, frustrated if things are delayed or if people don't see it your way from the get-go. And something that I'm always learning is that I learn more from people that disagree with me than I do from people that agree with me. And so if I go to a community and everyone starts out the day hating the project and everything about it and is worried about construction and doesn't want to see it, and they leave having been convinced that there is a use for this, and that even if it doesn't look perfect, we can make it perfect together. Those are that's our learning. It's never one or the other. You can.
Yeah, and I'm super hopeful because of projects like Clean Path New York that exist and are being implemented to provide cleaner air. Like it's not a far off dream of having clean air in New York City. We know what the solutions are, we just need to implement them, and they're being implemented. And everyone that descended at this event and in New York along the week, I mean, we're here to work on solutions. And I think that's really hopeful to me. And obviously I have like telling these optimistic stories. And yeah, I can't wait for this to progress and yeah, have a better New York City coming through.
From your lips to whatever deity follows yours, me too.
Definitely. We can open it up to Q&A. If anyone has a question, I'm not sure if we're gonna have a roaming mic or if I can, I think we will. Great, yeah.
I'm coming.
Thank you.
Where should
Okay, we got one right here.
Hello, Amy. Thank you so much for sharing so much knowledge. So my name is Joycelyn, and I worked as a consultant in the EV space. So my experience working with different clients, such as utilities, where I've worked on EV programs to help manage peak demand. So my question is, as there's been like a rise in use of electric vehicles, how does New York think of how to accommodate this rise in peak demand? Because I know we're all heading to 100% clean power by 2040, and we already know that the grid already has challenges with transitioning and meeting the existing demand with clean power, right? So then with the increase of EV use, there's going to be an increase of demand of clean energy. So I'm just curious, like, how does the state think of this? Because there's going to be an additional demand, and we have to think about that in the transition to clean power. Thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn. You raised such a good point because the state is moving toward electrification. They're trying to move away from the actual burning of fossil fuels. Electrification is good, but it means that the grid is more strained than ever before because we're plugging more things into it than ever before. We're plugging in EVs. I have, for some reason, like 2 phones and a laptop I'm plugging in every single day. I'm sure all of us are using the grid more than we ever have before. And as I mentioned, the grid itself was never designed to keep up with this kind of demand. And so we're seeing more and more grid failures. We're seeing more and more congestion. And if we're going to transition to clean power, it can't just be through the development of new wind and solar and offshore wind. It needs to be also just as much with the modernization of our grid. So this project, the one that I'm working on, is one piece of that. There are so many others, but I talked a bit about permitting here. It's a blessing and a curse because getting these things built is very, very slow. It involves lots of different agencies, lots of different government bureaucracies at the federal, state, city, local level. And while that's good, we definitely want to make sure that all of our government partners are engaged every step of the way. I think anything we can do to increase coordination between those entities would help speed up the grid's modernization and help ease some of the grid failures and congestion that you're alluding to. But those things have to happen in parallel. We can electrify, we can make sure that people are incentivized to use EVs. We also have to make sure that the grid is set up to be able to handle what you just described.
Yeah, got some more questions here. I see a hand up here.
Hi, my name is Taylor. I am also an energy infrastructure nerd. One question I have is really about like the need for clean path, right? So you talked a lot about our historical transmission lines. Many of them were built in the eminent domain. And what I'm curious about is like as we know there's this need for grid modernization to get the right power to the right place, why are they not able to do it under eminent domain? And where does clean path come in and kind of having to push this forward?
which we consider very fortunate because we are routing under existing transmission lines and rights of ways. And so we're able to build this large project without having to do extra greenfield development work, which is great. And actually the federal government is increasingly interested in incentivizing projects that co-locate in either existing rights of ways or, for example, in federal highways, all for the same reason, because as much as permitting, even if you're in a right of way, is complicated, it gets infinitely more complicated if you're greenfielding. So I think there's a lot of incentive and desire to be creative about what we're routing under and co-locating with, because that does save a lot of energy and time. And I don't want to say that greenfielding should never be used, because we do have a big energy need here, but there's still so much potential that hasn't been tapped with existing right-of-ways, and I kind of want to see more of that explored and used up before we resort to having to do greenfielding at this time.
Okay, anybody else? See a hand over here and over here. Go here first.
Hi, my name is Wasim. Thank you for the wonderful conversation, very enriching. Maybe my question is to you. It's really interesting to hear about how the community is very involved in the decision-making process. I come from a community-centered research and design research standpoint. So my question is around what are some of the sort of risks, drawbacks, or unintended consequences of a large project like this? And how do you go about solving some of those challenges? I'm sure the community has brought up some of these questions time and time again. So could you shed light on some of those POVs?
Yeah, it's a great question, because something I think about a lot is not trying to make light of some of the construction impacts that projects like this have, because I think communities rightfully can smell BS, and if you say that everything's going to be great and it's not going to be a bother at all, then they know that you're lying when you're starting from less than zero. So I try to be honest. So what this physically looks like is a 5-foot trench in the ground, and there's a transmission line built into it, and it's covered up. And because we're in those rights of ways, it's not anywhere that you would necessarily be walking around in anyway, because these areas are sort of cordoned off for electrical infrastructure use already. But it is construction, and that is impactful, and there will be trucks that are coming in and out while things are being built. Temporary, but we try to be honest about the fact that you might see some traffic in your neighborhood while this thing is built. The transmission line also routes underwater in the Hudson River. We purposely routed it to avoid some very ecologically sensitive areas of the river where we know there are species that are important to New York State that use those areas as breeding grounds, for example. So we route around those areas, but we still want to make sure that any submarine wildlife, for example, that's in the river isn't unduly impacted by construction. So we're making sure that we're timing that construction so that for example, fish have migrated away during the construction seasons. It's all about doing whatever studies and surveying work that you can do now, so that when you are in construction, you do everything you can to make sure that your impacts are minimal. In New York City, if most of you live here, I'm sure you see your roads ripped up once in a while for Con Ed or whatever to do their road work. So building this will look pretty much exactly the same. It'll be some very hideous orange red tape surrounding a couple of streets for probably 2 weeks, and then the road is covered up and patched up and it's done. So it's not nothing. There are construction impacts that we have to think about as a community, and that we have to think about as a developer to minimize, but all of them are temporary. And again, I think being honest about them up front gets people, number one, sort of their expectations are set as to what they can expect to see, and also they can tell us oh, there's a huge block party that happens at this time, like it'd be great if you weren't in construction then, and we can say, great, like we'll make sure not to be there during that time. It's all about just making sure we can manage what the construction will look like, so that again, it's at least as little of a burden as it possibly can be.
Great. And then one last question over here.
Hello, my name is Emily. I work with New York City Public Schools in the Office of Sustainability, which has nothing to do with my question. But you sort of touched on this just now. I'm just wondering, I used to live upstate New York. I know there tends to be oftentimes a rhetoric of sort of an enticed city in the sense that like it's perceived that the city gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of resources, and I can just imagine with a project like this where you're doing work upstate, which is sort of to benefit the city, that you run into some maybe public opposition from upstate communities. I'm just wondering if you see a lot of challenges from that. And sort of a side question to that is, do you have any sense of what we can envision for New York City's grid in terms of what sort of share can we ultimately get hyper-locally in terms of like solar panels, in terms of maybe offshore wind, versus how much will we need to sort of import our renewable energy to the city from elsewhere?
I'm going to take the first question first, and I might ask you to repeat the second one, because I think I cut out a little bit there. Yeah, there is some tension, I think, between upstate and downstate communities. And the tensions, by the way, exist on both sides. It's not just, upstate New York feeling a type of way about New York City. These communities look different, they have different priorities, their economies are different. And so, there's, I think, a sense of, I think people want to feel like they're not being taken advantage of, and that people want to, and what they're going through is fair. The fairness is is a big topic, I think, in this conversation. And I think the great thing about this particular project is the benefits that this project brings to the state. They're statewide, where this project is going to reduce 22% of fossil fuel-fired electricity across New York City. So that means that the NOx, SOx, and PM2.5, which are the major drivers of air quality issues, those are reduced across the state, not just in New York City. And then we're going to reduce 49 million tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of taking 9 million cars off the road. That benefit is also felt across New York State, not just in New York City. The project is going to create 8,000 jobs across New York State. And it's also going to, just because of the things that you have to buy and build along the way, catalyze about $4 billion in economic investment across the state. So the benefits of this project are, statewide, even if most of the electricity itself is being injected into the downstate electric grid. Like, it's really incredible how greening up one portion of the grid can ripple across the entire state's economy and infrastructure and air quality. So that's one thing. But I'll say too, we understand that hosting energy infrastructure is often not the most fair process. Like, some communities have had to host more infrastructure than others, and that's a tension that we have to deal with. For example, downstate New York has hosted all these fossil fuel plants for generations now, and we've talked about what that has resulted in terms of public health. Upstate New York has had to host a lot of transmission infrastructure that delivers energy down, and they've had to deal with the repercussions of that. So it's about finding ways that this project can sort of make the distribution of burden equitable, whether that's by, again, making sure the benefits are felt throughout, but also if there are investments we can make along the way in terms of supporting local community organizations, for example. We try to do that too, so that, again, there's incentive for communities to raise their hand and say yes to these kinds of things. I missed the last part of your question, I'm sorry.
It was so long, I'm sorry. No, I'm just wondering with that, for reaching our goal of 100% renewable by 2040, do you have any sense of how much New York City could end up, what share we could end up getting from our renewable needs, just more hyper-locally, so projects that are more, local solar, the offshore wind, I guess I could consider fairly local, versus sort of importing from other places. I don't know if you have any sense of that.
I don't know if I have the most technical answer to that question, but again, the CLC base has established some very, very strict mandates for this stuff. And one of them is 100% emissions for electricity by 2040. And from what I understand, the bulk of that is supposed to come from offshore wind and solar generated right here in New York. I mean, some of it, some hydropower, I think, is from Canada, but for the most part, I think we're trying to go out it alone on this, which is a really bold prospect, right? Like getting ourselves unhooked off of foreign fossil fuels. But I think there's a long way to go to get enough energy into our grid to make that a reality. And as I mentioned, making sure we have enough transmission to deliver that energy. And also, there's we have to make sure our buildings are set up to handle the kind of electrification that we're talking about too, because that's a big piece of the equation. We can electrify all we want if our buildings are, using systems that aren't compatible with what we're trying to push toward, then we have a delay in implementation. So that climate in New York is so fascinating because there's so many different pieces of it that will have to work in tandem to meet this goal that we've set up. And I think we might have to tweak some of the implementation along the way to make it a reality, but the processes are there. I think it's just getting the gears of government and private sector development coordinating to make it all work together.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. This was so great to chat with you. Everyone, there are many more panels going on throughout the day, so stay tuned. Check out Clean Path New York. I believe you have a public comment section on your website.
Yeah, I'll do a plug. We're at cleanpathny.com. There's a section on our website called Public Documents. And if you go there, you can see a bunch of fact pages, decks, PowerPoints, FAQs, all of that. There's also a link to it's called a case matter, I guess where the public can go and comment to the state about what they want to see happen on this project, whether they support it or don't support it or have feedback along the way. I encourage you to check it out. If you have good or bad or neutral things to say about it, I want to hear everything. So please check it out.
Great. Thank you all. If you need some good news and optimism, check out Joyce Sunny's.
Thank you so much. If you want to provide any feedback from this panel, please scan the QR code. We would love to know how you guys are liking the event today, what you want to see more of. Please stick around. We're going to have Seth Godin and Amir speak in just about 5 minutes.
Nerd away.
We're gonna nerd out. Just gotta get the cue from the okay, yeah, a couple more minutes here. Tech check? There it is, perfect. All right, cool. I have been given the green light, friends. Wow, look at this. What a room. Look at this. Nice. Look at that. They're here to see us, Mr. Godin.
What happened?
We got a nice little group here to see us.
The room is acoustically horrible. It's great for photography,
Yeah, you're right. It is
but I
kind of
actually cannot hear a word you're saying. Now we're going to have feedback.
Let's try this.
Okay, that works.
That works, right?
Yeah.
Can you also hear us in the back?
Amazing.
Amazing. See?
Well done.
It's not too late.
So, could I say something first? Just take a second, catch your breath, and look around the room. All of the right people are here. The energy, the beauty, the magic, the people who decided to come today, this is overwhelming. Thank you for showing up the way you do. I am so lucky to be in this room with you. Thank you.
I think I speak for all of us, Seth, when I say we're really the lucky ones. You know, the climate movement has been going on for a long time. A lot of us are new to it. A lot of us have been in it for a while. And we build on the shoulders of giants, and I'm looking at one. So,
Everyone's doing their best. So what do you want to talk about?
what do we want to talk about? Well, I got a couple questions. I have also some visual aids that I want to show us.
Made some really cool
I
stuff.
made some stuff.
Bring it on. What do you got?
Show it up? Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Well, to set the tone for everyone here, you are in the marketplace of the future. This is among, if not the longest running event in Climate Week history, as of now, that we're running on 8 years. I see some new faces and some familiar faces, but it all looks like family, so thank you guys for being here. We're going to have this chat for maybe 30 minutes. Seth has a family reunion to get to. So we're going to make it count, and then we'll take some questions. But the whole spirit of Marketplace in general is about demystification. It's about demystifying climate solutions for the public, and we do it in the spirit of the World's Fair, inspired by the 1939 New York World's Fair, which is the first time people saw television. So the working tagline for us is novel now, new soon. Novel now, normal soon, sorry. So that's why we're here. We've been building. 2 years ago, we had the honor of having Seth's book, The Carbon Almanac, distributed at Marketplace in the Future. We gave out like 700 of them. You came to the event.
It was great, but it's not my book. It's our book.
It's
I didn't write it. There's people here who helped, but 1,900 volunteers in 90 countries. So it's not my book.
So can you just talk to us about the management process of that? Let's just start with some logistics. Like, how does one even project manage something like that?
Okay, so for people who are just joining us, I've been making books since 1986. I did almanacs, I did the People magazine, Celebrity Almanac, the Business Almanac, and lately I've been an author. When I read Ministry for the Future, I realized I hadn't been blogging about climate very much. I wrote my first post about climate change 20 years ago. It didn't solve the problem, and then I didn't write about it a lot. And I realized the reason I didn't write about it is I felt stupid, and I felt like a hypocrite, and I felt like me talking about something I didn't really understand wasn't okay. And then I said, well, if I don't understand it, I bet other smart people don't understand it either. Well, a carpenter thinks everything can be fixed with a saw, and an author thinks everything can be fixed with a book. So why don't I make an almanac? But then I realized if I did it myself, I was capable of doing that, but it would take a long time and it wouldn't make a point. And my point is, community action is going to solve this problem. Systems made the problem, and community action will solve it. So how can I model community action? So my hard work was to build the digital platform and to invite the first 40 people. And then those 40 people each invited 40 more people, and then my job was to be sometimes an arbitrator, sometimes a tastemaker, often a maker of culture, but someone would show up who was way more talented or focused or skilled at something, and we'd say, go, run. So this almanac is all footnoted, and we built the whole thing in 5 months. Everyone was a volunteer, including me, and not one significant error has been found since we published it. Amazing. And that's what happens when the community has a vision and ships the work.
Was there a primary person that you sort of leaned on at the beginning? Like, okay, cool, like I can trust this person to help me curate the rest?
No, there were dozens of people.
Okay.
Right? There were people. So there's someone here today who almost killed me when she ran me over with her bicycle. And that's how Eva and I met. And all of a sudden, Eva's there, digging holes, turning things over, making things work. And all I know is she almost ran me over with her bicycle, and now she's one of my dearest friends. So you just find people and you say, make a promise and keep it. My job was to create the conditions for people to make a promise, and the community made sure you kept the promise. Did all 1,900 people stick around? No, but that's fine. That's the way the world works too. That people come, they give what they can give, and then they move on to the next thing. But as a result, it's been now translated into Italian and Dutch and Japanese and Chinese and Korean, and the ebook versions have been downloaded millions of times. It's not going to solve the climate problem, but at least it's going to give people confidence to talk.
Absolutely, it's these compounding benefits. You invest all of your time and energy into creating this, and the way that reverberates, the ripple of the pond, and it's even we see that visibly. If anyone has their book with them, at the very back, there's the future is in everyone's hands. It's kind of like the old books that we used to get in school. Every year you use the old textbooks, so you're supposed to write your name in this and pass it on to the next person.
Right, exactly right.
I absolutely love it. So, and I've listened to some of your interviews, and I know that you were approaching this with a relatively clean slate too, and then you said that the only page that you wrote yourself was the breath page.
Right, that's where it started.
Will you bring us into that moment, please?
Okay, so not a lot of people are comfortable with arithmetic, which isn't the same as math. You're not comfortable with arithmetic because you had a horrible set of teachers and they gave you tests. Why would you be? So when people talk about what is actually going on with the climate, it sounds like yada, 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 yada in our head because they start saying numbers that don't really work. So let's just try this as an exercise. Take a deep breath and just hold it. Okay, whenever it's comfortable, you can let it go, I don't care. But that breath you just took, imagine it has 10,000 little bits in it. 10,000 bits. 10 years ago, 3 of those bits would have been carbon. 3 out of 10,000. Now, it's 4. And if it gets to 5, the whole world changes forever and ever in an unrecognizable way. Out of 10,000. That's why it's invisible. That's why it's very hard to understand. That's why we can't shrink our way out of this problem. Because the amount of leverage that little drop of carbon has is so huge, we're going to need a systemic approach. One person deciding to compost isn't going to matter. But creating systemic change through community action and putting the market to work to make it go from 4.5 back to 3, we have the power to do that, but only if we understand it and we don't get tricked into thinking, I'm a hypocrite, so I better not do anything. And one of the things we talk about in the book is carbon footprint. Most people don't know it, but the phrase carbon footprint was invented by an ad agency for British Petroleum. Why did British Petroleum pay money for carbon footprint? To make you feel guilty. Because if you feel like your carbon footprint's too big, you're not going to take community action. Instead, you're just going to hide out in a corner. And so there are all of these systemic foundational elements that have been built by folks who profited from burning carbon, and we have to turn that around. At the very same time, we live a life of convenience, luxury, and privilege. It's very challenging.
It's such a good visual, that 10,000 dots. It's page 42 in your textbooks. I'm also a part-time professor, so sometimes that has been done. But it's page 42 in your textbooks. It's such a great visual, and Jacob Simon was interviewing Amy CleanPath in the last one, talking about how climate communications, and if it makes sense to my dad, it works, and that's when I talk to my dad about. My dad's a smart guy, but like breaking it down, so it's helpful. Are you a visual person? Do you see like, as you're talking about giving the book to someone, the community action, the galvanization, do you see that in your mind's eye?
I'm probably a hybrid of both, and I'm not trying to sort of manifest a vision here. Everyone sees something I don't see, believes something I don't believe. The question is, what is the power of tools? Right? The first person who built a kayak in the Pacific Ocean knew at some level that people were going to copy the idea of the kayak. And then the kayak changed an entire culture. Not because one person brought a kayak to every single person's house, but because you give people a tool and it starts to change what people do. And there are many challenges the climate movement has had. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is that no one's in charge. And another challenge is no one knows what to do. And that's not the same as most challenges that the community comes together to solve. So I grew up near Buffalo, New York, and Love Canal was the first Superfund site, a horrible toxic waste dump built by Hooker Chemical. Once it became clear what Love Canal was, people knew what to do, right? We need to move the parents and the young kids out. We need to declare this thing an emergency. We need to get rid of all the toxic waste, cover it up. It's very clear what to do. It is not clear what to do about the fact that there's going to be 50 million climate refugees in the next 10 years, and there are all these complicated reasons why. So because it's a complicated problem, the status quo wants us to give up. They want us to say, oh, this is so complicated, I'll just drink liquid death water, right? That'll solve all my problems. Well, no, it won't solve all our problems, but we've dealt with complicated problems before, so we probably should do it.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, can somebody grab me a coffee in a Cup Zero cup? Can we just do that so that we can also continuously, thank you, Maria, I appreciate that, so we can can keep it pretty comprehensive here. Reminding me about the drinks. That'll work.
Ooh, that was so fast.
Matthew, come on.
Is that a used coffee?
Is it used?
It's mine, but
For you, no, it's not. Well, I'll drink it. Oh, okay. What is that, water?
This is orange tea.
All right. About. So when the world learned about the ozone layer,
Right, great example.
we acted. How did that? What conditions were present for that to happen? And why are they missing that?
Okay, so industry is magic. Industry made the world rich. Industry is about two things: convenience and efficiency. Convenience, because that's what consumers want. That's what all the partners in an industry want. They want all the parts to fit together. They want them to show up at the loading dock on time. And efficiency, because managers can figure out how to make the thing a little cheaper tomorrow. So McDonald's is a huge, 1 out of 7 meals eaten in the United States comes from McDonald's. McDonald's is an industry that has people all the way from the cornfields to the teenager who works at the counter as part of it. Efficiency and convenience. When we think about the ozone layer, what happened was that the propellants that made things like antiperspirant more convenient and that made air conditioning more efficient were causing the problem. Scientists were able to show this very directly. Turns out that one molecule of CFCs destroys 10,000 molecules in the ozone layer. And the urgency was really there. But there's a choke point because you can name on one sheet of paper all the companies that make CFCs. So it wasn't baked in where every single individual was creating this thing. Governments came together, but fortunately, because it wouldn't have worked without this, industry figured out a replacement that was almost as efficient and almost as convenient, and then they got better and better at making the new plant, right? The challenge we have here is everything in our world is based on the fact that first in Pennsylvania and then at Spindletop in Texas, we figured out we could get energy out of the ground almost for free. So everything you wear, everything you eat, everything you do, all the transportation, all of it is based on that one thing. But shutting down Exxon didn't change anything because other people can take it out of the ground. And so the reason it's worth looking at something like the Almanac is to understand that it's complicated, but it's also simple. It's complicated because, for example, 25% of climate change is caused by cows. If we were really serious about climate change, we could just kill all the cows tomorrow, and 25% of the problem would go away in one day. And there's 1 billion cows. If everyone on Earth ate meat the way Americans do, we would need another planet just to hold the cows. So the math is very simple. You don't have to be a genius to figure this out. But people are saying that it's not efficient or convenient for us to walk away from cows. So now you're starting to feel the texture of the problem. It is not shaming your neighbor for having one leaf blower. It's saying, how do we get the entire village to ban leaf blowers? Because if enough villages ban leaf blowers, they will stop making leaf blowers and we'll go back to the same thing we did with the ozone.
Yeah, so there is this kind of sweet spot. One of the metaphors that I really like thinking about when it comes to social change is that of the acupuncturist. And thinking about the role of the acupuncturist to determine where it's most effective to place the needle to create a downstream effect, right? And so there's this sweet spot in terms of where to intervene, at what scope of community intervention.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
And what we're trying to do is build new systems. So we built a system that says one of the easiest ways to get rich is to make something that upper middle income people will buy because it's more convenient. That system has been in place for a long time. That's where Cake Mix came from, for example, and so many other things. Cake Mix, Duncan Hines, right? And so when you build a different system that ratchets in a different direction, the market isn't stupid. It will race in that direction as fast as it possibly can. And it doesn't matter how much an individual entity wants it not to do that or to do it. It will do it if the system keeps reinforcing that motion.
Yes. Okay, I want to bookmark us here on preconditions for systems change. And now I think I'd like to get into this visualization here. This is, so what we've done here, first of all, we have to thank our sponsor slash partner, Canva and Flourish. It's interesting when you're in the climate space because you work with values aligned people and then like your sponsors, everyone just becomes, it's just a big partnership, you know, we're all working together. So the Canva has a new product called Flourish that makes data visualization easy. So what we did in the spirit of this conversation is we pulled some key pages from the book and turned them into visualization. So we're gonna give this a shot. Can you get us started, please, Sophia? Yeah. All right. So imagine here there's a 10-meter cube in the middle of this room. This is probably it's like 30 feet.
No, but you can cut it in half and it would fit in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's this is a 10-meter cube, and that is the equivalent of a metric ton of CO2 released into the atmosphere. So we got 2 metric tons of CO2 released in New York City every second. Does this bring you back memories? Which is almost 173,000 metric tons every single day. And that equates to 126 million metric tons a year. So if that's just one city, how much CO2 can the entire world produce? And as you said, everything we do, everything we touch is connected to these systems. So you can't do it's inextricable from our daily lives. So this is the world we're sitting at nearly 1,200 gigatons of CO2 globally. And we can see the distribution of responsibility that the nations bear, that these nations bear, right? And embarrassingly, soberingly rather, right? So we have these 5 nations that are almost equal to the rest of the world. So if it's important, and this also goes back to the spirit of marketplace, demystifying the sources of emissions, demystifying climate solutions. Where do these emissions even come from? So I started talking about it a second ago. We can, at a very, very high level, we see these sectors of the economy where emissions come from. We see agriculture, forestry, and land use, industry and waste, and then energy. And of course, when you dive a little bit deeper, you see that it's not as clean. You start seeing all these subtopics where energy is used in transportation, in buildings, in industry, etc. And we can even go a little bit deeper. Is this legible? Will we be able to see it in that? More or less? Yeah, thank you. So we can keep going even further. Who knew that residential buildings generated this much CO2? And so it's important to also recognize the effects of them. Obviously, we see the glacial warming, we see the shift in seasons, etc. But what is this? How does this affect human beings? So if you remember this ton of CO2, yep. So in your book, there's a section here where it talks about 4,434 metric tons released into the atmosphere cause a premature death to occur. And we see that the lifestyle of Nigerians, but based on that, we need 146 Nigerians to produce a premature death. So if we keep going, we see that's 25 Brazilians. Anyone want to guess how many Americans it takes to produce? Close. 3.5 is what we see in the book. And we're not putting this here to shame anyone, but we're putting this here to illuminate the gravity that we hold in the systems that we live in our natural systems. And so we do have a lot of influence. We do have a lot of responsibility. It's clear to see how climate change has disproportionate effects on the world. And it's important to also know where do these emissions go when they're released. These are called the sinks. So if we look at the whole pie chart, a whole pie of emissions, we see that oceans absorb about a quarter. We see that plants absorb about 30%. So thank you, Mother Nature, for taking care of half our problem, and the rest is unabsorbed. So we need to pull that out. We need to turn off the faucet, cut the sink. And then this is going to bring us back to the point about preconditions, is that we also do have some good news, right? So we're in a gradient. This is not a switch where things are just going to be on off. We're in this great transition. That's what's happening now. We see the price of renewable energy sources have dropped. We see that renewables now produce 30% of US utility scale electricity. And there are loads of more indicators. This is what I want to continue talking about. Let's hold this slide right here because it looks really pretty. So, first of all,
Great job, guys. Beautiful. What URL do people go to use this tool? Where do they find it?
Next slide.
Okay, sorry.
Next slide?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
There you go.
Woo!
We have it. We wanted to show that. We'll put this back up here.
So
at the end as well.
while
Let's go
people
back.
are doing their QR code scanning, one of the things that isn't obvious when you start going through this litany is why is food and fashion and residential buildings and items like that so high on the list? And the answer is because everybody does it. And so when you multiply any number times 8 billion, it's a very big number. This is why systems change is so important, that we could get rid of the private jets in the world, we should, but it wouldn't matter because there aren't that many private jets in the world. Whereas if everyone in the world decided to go naked, it would make a difference because there's 8 billion of us. What you take away from this is the power of systems change. That the magic, the best news of all of those charts is it is cheaper to use solar than to use coal. The market doesn't have to change its mind now. The market's always wanted the cheapest one. They're going to pick the cheapest one. Good news, the cheapest one isn't coal anymore. That's a systems change. And because it's off the grid, it's an even bigger systems change. Because people who don't live in a heavily developed part of the world are going to have a much better life now. Because when they come online, they're going to have unlimited, free, renewable power.
And what other key indicators do you think are super important that become available in this decisive decade? And given also, how does that make you feel when you see that it's cheaper to get clean energy? Like, what does that tell you? I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, how does it make me feel? It's the second best feeling I had working on the Almanac. The first one was what happens when people come together. The solace we found in each other was the biggest thing by far. But the second best news is technology isn't going to completely save the day, but it's going to establish the conditions to do so. The thing that has to happen next, this is me talking, not the Almanac, is there needs to be a price on carbon. When there's a price on carbon, all of the hard work that has been done so far by companies in tech will finally pay off. And what a price on carbon doesn't mean a tax on carbon. It means let's let people, if they want to use a high carbon thing, go ahead and do so. Charge them for that and give the money to everybody else. Just a dividend straight to everybody who didn't choose to do that.
Are there any role models of that happening right now?
So there's a bipartisan group in DC. There have been secretaries of state of both parties that have been involved, and they have written white papers and they've been allowed, they've explained exactly how the whole thing works. They're referenced in the Almanac. But you know, when I'm sitting here saying if I could do one thing, that would be the one thing. Create the conditions for us to charge people who use a lot of carbon and give the money to people who don't. Because the market will wake up instantly and say, oh, we know what to do now.
One of the frameworks that is on the syllabus at the new school where I teach at Parsons is called the 5 Levers of Social Change. And it's about the conditions that are necessary to shift these systems. And the five kind of categories, the levers that need to be pulled. One of them is data and information, you see here. Another one is public perception, product and service innovation, bright spots, which is basically like the role models, and then policy. So you need people that are playing in these spaces in order to shift these.
Yeah, I love that.
So you have this bipartisan example, any other bright spots or things in these, in terms of the preconditions, anything else that comes up for you, that brings up for you?
Well, the other thing that is, there was a really heartbreaking, poorly written hit piece in the Times last year about how meat substitutes haven't fulfilled their promise. It's super easy to write an article like that every time a new technology comes along. And the fact is, it's soon going to be less convenient and more expensive to eat a cow. And again, when that happens, industry will wake up and say, oh, please give us the efficient, convenient one, we'll sell that instead.
Yeah, it's almost, this is so disheartening, right? When you go and you try to buy a plant burger, it's more expensive than the non-plant burger. That's just a for now thing, right?
Yeah, well, because we've been subsidizing cows with hundreds of millions or billions of dollars a year. And as those subsidies start to decrease, the correct price will be charged, and then the alternatives will be cheaper.
Where do I need, if I have an arrow to shoot, where do I aim my arrow to be most effective as a person or as a community to shift subsidies?
Okay, so this is a key question that comes up all the time. When the people who get the joke say, what should I do? The two things that I respond with are, one, shun the non-believers. You do not need to spend any time arguing with people who want to have an argument. They're oppositional, they want to have an argument. They're not going to change their mind. We don't need a unanimous vote to change the world. We simply need to organize the people who want to change the world. And then the second thing is, don't fix your own house, but do fix your own village. That you have everything you need to organize the 20 people it would take to have your high school cafeteria have meetings Monday. You have what you need to organize the 30 people to ban leaf blowers in your town. So a leaf blower, a gas-powered leaf blower, in addition to being annoying, in 1 hour puts out the same amount of climate change as a pickup truck driven from here to Los Angeles.
Just because it's so intense.
Because of the kind of thing it dumps into the air. Because the way a pickup truck engine burns gasoline is way more efficient than the way a leaf blower burns gasoline. It's a two-stroke engine and it's got all this other stuff in it, and all the facts are inside the element. So I have a neighbor who bought an electric car and put all the stuff into his house to charge the electric car, but his landscapers break 3 leaf blowers. So in 1 week, he has undone all of the value of switching to an electric car. So it's so easy to ban a leaf blower because we have an alternative. It's quieter, it's more convenient. What's the problem? The problem is, if you're a landscaper, change is not your friend. And you have to start a whole bunch of different practices. But if you're gonna get a ticket every time you do it, you'll change. So in our town, and I live in a village where leaf blowers are banned. The village, 10 feet from my house, because I'm on the border, it's not. The air keeps moving back and forth as far as I can tell. So we can do this. And once you do that, then you can do the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. So we're not sitting here waiting for somebody in Washington, D.C. to solve the problem. We are organizing other people to cause local systems change, because that's contagious.
Yeah, 100%. I love that so much, and I'm never going to look at leaf blowers the same ever again. I have a continuation to this question, but before I get there, is there anything else that, like before you kind of, what's the which color pill did they take in the Matrix? The red pill?
Blue pill or blue pill?
Before you took the pill and you started unsee, like you can't unsee what you see, right? What other things like leaf blowers are you just like, how are we still doing this? And burgers.
Well, the other one, there are 2 other numbers that are super surprising at the top. And there are some people here from Drawdown. If you go to the back of the Drawdown book, they list them in order. I think if we could just do the top 10, the rest don't matter, right? So 2 of the largest contributors to climate change are concrete, 8%. Why? Because you have to heat it up close to the temperature of the sun to make it. And 2, fast fashion, because everyone's wearing clothes. But the idea of clothes that you wear for 2 weeks and then throw out, that's pretty new. And that's something that the world wouldn't have to go naked to fix.
Can we talk about your gender?
My what?
Your jacket?
My jacket.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah, let's see it. It's beautiful. Is there a story here?
Always.
Of course there is.
So what month is this?
September.
September.
Almost.
Okay, so in April or May, the beehives near your house are in really big trouble because the winter is hard for bees. And the reason that bees make honey is so they have something to eat during the winter. It's an energy storage device. Many hives don't make it through the winter in the Northeast because they don't have enough honey or something bad. But if they do, the maidens, and it's the maidens that run the hive, not the queen. The maidens will get together and they will build an egg chamber. And they will go to the queen and cajole her into laying and fertilizing a queen egg, which is rare because every hive only has one queen. And then something extraordinary will happen. They will send a message to the rest of the bees. And in just 3 weeks, they will collect enough pollen to replenish all of the honey in the hive. They will refurbish the hive and get it all cleaned up. And then, just as the baby queen is being born, the old queen, all the maidens, and all the fit bees will leave. They will all leave and never come back. And this swarm is called the Song of Increase. The Song of Increase, if you've ever seen it or heard it, you'll never forget it. They're leaping into the void and leaving behind a perfectly fine place, but they need to leave it behind. And now they only have 2 days to find a new place to live and build a hive. This Song of Increase moved me when I heard it. It touched me about what is possible. And that is what you model. What you have done for the people in this room for 8 years is you are modeling what it feels like to sing the Song of Increase.
Not what I thought I was going to hear when I asked my jacket. But thank you. There's a 2-part mantra I think that I live by, and I think we all can resonate with this in our own ways. And it's the first part is that self-expression is a life force. And the second part is life always gravitates towards life. Whether you're you, whether you're me, whether you're a bee. That's cool.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get off her.
No, please, no, I'm full spectrum over here. This is great, Seth. This is really, really awesome. I know you have your family reunion coming up.
But this is so great, I'm tempted to just hang out, but I would get in trouble.
Right here, that's true. Yeah. What else is on your radar right now? What else? Where's your energy going?
Well, my new book is about strategy, and I learned a lot of strategy from my friends at the Almanac. And they are my friends. I didn't know them before, but I know them now forever. And strategy is all about systems. So every day I'm talking about systems change and how systems are invisible until we see them. So being here, you see the systems. And we're not going to buy our way out of this problem, but we are going to create the conditions for other people to buy their way out of this problem, because the market is the most powerful thing humans have ever invented, and we just have to steer that system. And we're going to do it through community action. I know we're a broken record, but that's the answer.
No, it's true. And a minute ago, before I asked you about your jacket, I was going to share it. I feel like I'm at a point in my career where I finally have got my hand on the knob, and I feel like I can really make a difference here. I'm going to sidebar for like 60 seconds and then come right back. I'm working on this really awesome project with the New York City Mayor's Office of Nightlife. And I'm a former DJ, still DJ. For anyone that's going to be around here at 9 p.m., transformed into climate, and now they're integrating in a way I never thought possible. So the idea is that 70% of New York City's emissions come from buildings. And I was approached by the Office of Nightlife to create a webinar series in how nightclub owners can be more environmentally friendly. But I wasn't really interested in the straws and cups conversation only, right? That's like a gateway drug. But it's like, it's less about reducing the waste, but it's how do we leverage nightlife's culture-changing capacity to accelerate climate goals, to accelerate higher order climate goals. And diving deeper into that, I was like, oh, wait a minute. 70% of our emissions in the city come from buildings. A nightclub is a freaking building. So with that new context lens, now we look at a nightclub not just as a place where people go dancing, but we see it as a Trojan horse into larger building electrification. And so we're piloting that at the House of Yes in Bushwick. And now I'm like, oh, I see where emissions come from. I can put my hand on the damn pipe. I understand that I need to remove this gas boiler and install a heat pump. I get it. And if we do this and we demystify it and we show it to the world, then 2, 3, 4 more nightclubs can get on board. And nightclubs are so badass. It can galvanize the whole thing.
7 words, people like us do things like this. Figure out who the people like us are, figure out what the things like this are, and system change happens. Eva, is there anything I forgot to say?
No.
Everything's good? If you guys have any questions,
Yeah, we have questions.
Eva's going to raise her hand. She's the one to talk to. I'm going to have to run.
Yeah. 742, let's get you out of here. One question?
Yes, great.
One question.
Hi.
Actually, this is a question. It's just to give a bit of information. I am from Senegal. My name is Ousmane Pam, and I'm founder of a network of communities in northern Senegal. Reforesting, also in northern Senegal, across Africa, we're building a green wall, to stop desertification. And also, so the whole, the pollution that's happening here, the carbon that is produced here doesn't stay here.
Correct.
So in Africa, we're facing now more and more droughts, dryness, and in some of our villages we don't even have electricity. And yesterday I was in a Times Square again for the very first time, and I was so impressed by all the light and all the energy that is being used here. So I think if we need to put again the world in the right track, we need to support these communities back in Africa trying to produce and plant millions of trees to offset the carbon in the atmosphere.
Well said.
So my organization is a non-profit. It's called the REDES. It's a network of eco-villages in the Sahel region. The Sahel region is again under the Sahara and the Green Africa. So we are very much being affected by what's happening now in terms of industrial pollution. And again, fortunately our communities are standing up, planting millions and millions of trees. And we're looking for volunteers, we're looking for people to come and support. And next year, in February, we're going to organize also the second edition of our Eco-Village Festival in Northern Senegal. You're all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go.
I think I should.
Yeah, let's go. Everybody, please give it a round of applause. Give Seth Godin a round of applause, please. Thank you. All right. Can I have you autograph my book?
Thank you, everybody. Go make.
We're going to kick off with the Creatives for Climate mini summit. Right after this, it's going to be 3 hours of conversations about the integration of climate comms and creativity. So stay tuned. Enjoy the rest of the show.